Good afternoon, D.C. I'm Pete Mundo, filling in for Vince Coglianese. I host mornings in Kansas City on KCMO Talk Radio. So, some new polling's come out today. I want to share that with you as we look ahead to Iowa. And that's, when people always say, hey, the national polls, here's what the national polls say. I just, not that I really don't care. I'm curious what's happening in Iowa. I'm curious what's happening in New Hampshire. I'm curious about the early states far more than I am anything else, because that's, of course, where you can build momentum. And some new polling's been done. Now, take it with a grain of salt. It's the New York Times. It's Siena College. So it's always with a grain of salt. Always. But it does show what I've expected the trend to be. Donald Trump in a lot of the national polls is at about 55%, give or take. And it's about a 40% gap till you get to Ron DeSantis, and everybody else is a distant thought. Trump's at 44% in this recent Iowa poll, New York Times, Siena College. Once again, with a grain of salt. DeSantis at 20%. Tim Scott making some headway at 9%. Vivek Ramaswamy at 5%. Nikki Haley 4%. Pence, and on down the line from there. So it's kind of what you'd expect. This it's not even a three-horse race. That's not fair to Trump to call this a three-horse race. It's not. It's Trump and everybody else, but there is a smaller gap, albeit slightly, a smaller gap between Donald Trump and the field in Iowa. Now, why would that be? Well, Iowa is getting a firsthand look at all the candidates. Iowa is getting to evaluate all the options that they've got. And, being in Kansas City, we have a little more connection to what's going on up in Iowa, getting up that way and getting to talk to folks up there. And I'm not suggesting in any way, there's no hot take prediction here. I'm just, trying to keep the seat warm for Vince while he's gone. I'm not suggesting Tim Scott is in any way going to be the nominee, but he is the guy that I've heard from in Kansas City from folks up in Iowa who is drawing the most intrigue. And when you compare it to the national polling that has him at 3, he's triple his national polling in Iowa at 9. So, if you're looking for silver linings of positivity, that would be it if you're a guy like Tim Scott. But, nobody else has made a lot of headway. Like Vivek Ramaswamy seems like a good guy with great ideas. Vivek Ramaswamy is a figment of conservative Twitter's imagination. Like, don't get me wrong. I think he'd be an outstanding guy to keep around in some way, shape, or form. And he's articulate, and he's passionate, and, he's got very good, succinct ideas. He knows how to explain them and describe them. And I appreciate that about him. But he's not going to be the nominee. He's just not. So this just came out today. New York Times Siena poll, 432 likely Iowa caucus goers. It was taken before a third indictment against Trump was made public on Tuesday, so we'll see how that changes things. Here's the thing with Trump, and Trump kind of joked about it. The more indictments, the better he does. Now, I don't know if there's a point of diminishing returns on these indictments. I have wondered that myself. I don't know if anyone's going to maybe put together like a Trump indictment chart where, at some point when you hit a certain number of indictments, the rate of return goes down. I'm sure someone could get the XY axis going on that. But, you get the point here. It hardens his base. And I think this one in particular helps Trump out more than maybe any other. Because this latest indictment is purely a freedom of speech issue for those that are actually paying attention. If you're not, rotting your brain with MSNBC and CNN, and you actually read the indictment, and it's all of 40 pages, and you understand what it's about, it's very simply a free speech thing. So this is one of the indictments where when you look at the other ones, certainly the New York City one was a joke. The classified documents one is the most concerning per legal experts. But this one goes right in with the Alvin Bragg stuff in New York City. It's comical. Now, with the markets just closing, what I usually do after the markets close is I pop over to CNBC.com and just see what happened. And I know you heard at the top of the hour in the news that, Dow, S&P, NASDAQ all off about a percentage point. Well, then I saw this in the corner of CNBC's website. Chris Christie meets Zelensky in Ukraine as he tries to build momentum in GOP primary. You heard that right. Chris Christie meets Zelensky. And I know Zelensky's gotten a lot from us. Has he gotten enough billions of dollars to be an American citizen who can vote in our elections? Did I miss that at some point? I mean, is it like if your country gets hundreds of billions of dollars and essentially a blank check that you just get to vote in American elections? Am I once again, I'm just trying to figure out the rules. But that headline, I'm like, wait, so here's a guy, Chris Christie, trying to build momentum in a Republican primary. And instead of being in like Iowa, where people actually are going to be caucusing, or New Hampshire, where people are going to be casting votes, Chris Christie's like, I'm going to Ukraine. What am I missing? Somebody explain to me what I'm missing at an 888-630-WMAL, 888-630-9625. Like, that's something out of the Babylon Bee has got to do something with this. They've got to have a good time with this. The article goes on the note, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie on Friday met with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky during a surprise trip to Kiev. Like, what is this? George W. Bush showing up to meet the troops on Christmas Eve in Kabul? I mean, what is this supposed to impress anybody? Oh, my goodness. The unannounced travel, writes CNBC, was revealed as Christie a long-shot candidate. That's a nice way to put it. For the 2024 Republican presidential nomination, appeared to be making headway in the key primary state of New Hampshire, according to a new poll. Christie met with Zelensky at the presidential palace, where he reiterated his support for increasing U.S. aid to Ukraine, a view that distinguishes him from some of his GOP competitors, including former President Donald Trump. Are New Hampshire voters going to be impressed? And by the way, who's paying for Christie to meet Zelensky? But are New Hampshire voters going to be impressed when Christie comes back trying to make some headway in the state? And he goes, yep, you guys wouldn't believe where I was. Where were you? Meeting with Zelensky. Okay. All right. Okay. Wow. Well, that is just great. That's strong stuff there, Chris. Wow, I was kind of on the fence about you, but, geez, I'm all in. Chris Christie, spending time in Ukraine. That one is confusing to me. That one makes absolutely no sense. Meantime, you've got this happening as well. And I was surprised because yesterday this didn't get a lot of attention. Like, it did, but it was just kind of a headline. And then I started to see people on both sides of the aisle push back on the idea that this is a good idea. And that is Ron DeSantis agreeing to debate Gavin Newsom. And by the way, Newsom has not responded as of, this afternoon. We're sitting here at about 4:15 in the afternoon. We have not heard anything from Gavin Newsom after Ron DeSantis agreed on Sean Hannity's show to debate him. Cut 9. Let's roll it.
Absolutely. I'm game. Let's get it done. Just tell me when and where. We'll do it. And here's the thing, Sean. I mean, in one respect, the debate between California and Florida, has already been had, as you suggest. People have been voting on that. They've been voting on it with their feet. They have fled California in record numbers. Florida has been the #1 state for net in-migration. We have the #1 ranked economy, #1 now in education, crime rate at a 50-year low. But in another sense, this is the debate for the future of our country, because you have people like Joe Biden. They would love to see the Californication of the United States. Biden may not even be the nominee. You could have Gavin Newsom. You could have Kamala Harris. And I think if we go down that direction, that's going to accelerate American decline. We can't see America decline anymore. We need to reverse.
I've heard people on both sides of the aisle say they don't like this. And I don't understand it at all. I think this is outstanding. I mean, there's this article here, San Francisco newspaper, Bay Area's best, what is this thing here? sfgate.com. Sorry, I'm not spending a lot of time on California newspaper websites, but I thought this was interesting. Headline, it's embarrassing Ron DeSantis agreed to debate Gavin Newsom. Really? Why? He's going to clean his clock. I mean, I think this is so valuable. Not just for these guys. I think it's valuable for them for this different reasons. I think DeSantis needs something separate from just being in a GOP primary debate where everyone says more or less the same thing for 2 minutes. And for Gavin Newsom, if he is kind of running this shadow campaign in case Joe trips and falls, he's kind of sharpening his sword, so to speak. But I think for us, the American people, we need more of this. We don't get any real true political debate anymore. We don't get it really in media. Oftentimes, we don't get it in our political discourse. I mean, people are, unfortunately, as divisive as things are, people are mostly in their bubbles. And we have an opportunity here to see these two guys, one in deep blue California and one in purple turned red Florida, debate two incredibly different visions of what America has been, what it presently is, and what it should be for the next generation with real policy. I love this. I mean, even the last couple of election cycles have been driven mostly by personality over substantive policy discussions. So, I don't know why people on either side are bothered by this. My attitude is let them go. The more of this we do, the better. We used to get it on TV, but now, you turn on most of the news media, and they might throw a Republican or somebody on there, but, they're going to be a little squishy, and there's going to be one of them, and the rest of the panel is going to beat the heck out of them and beat them like a drum, and they're just going to be there to be the punching bag. That's how it always goes, right? That's what it is. It's The View. Maybe it's a Meet the Press panel. And then you have the Five and Fox has a little bit of that as well, where you got the one person who kind of ends up being the punching bag. And it's entertaining, but you're telling me we get two prominent governors in prime time sometime this fall. Hopefully Newsom doesn't back out. I hope he doesn't back out. But I'm sure if he does, there'll be some great excuse, and the media will defend him on why he backed out. Oh, he can't be on stage with a guy like Ron DeSantis. He can't be in his presence. But this is what we need as a country. And the last two election cycles, we haven't gotten it. I mean, 2020, obviously the presence of COVID oversaw so much of the conversation. And then 2016, God bless Trump. He got the win in 2016. But what do you remember policy-wise, or what phrases do you remember from 2016? I'll give you a second. I remember two things. Lock her up, build the wall. And thank goodness it worked. Thank goodness Trump won. He knew what he was doing. He got the victory. He did an outstanding job 3.5 years leading up to COVID, economically, overseas, and then there were some issues after that. But it worked. But it wasn't okay, what are we doing about $32 trillion in debt? Let's really dig on that. How would Ron DeSantis handle it? How would Gavin Newsom handle it? You have two incredibly different visions for the future of America. And the fact that they hopefully are going to get on a stage at some point this fall and debate that, I love it. I think both guys win. I think we win if we watch it, if we digest it and consume it. And I hope that a lot of people will. I hope it gets huge numbers. I'm not expecting, the numbers you'll get for, say, the GOP debate later this fall or later this month, but I'm expecting and hoping for some really big numbers. And I'm hoping that more people watch it than even the expectations are going into it. So that is going to be very, very exciting to watch it unfold. All right, let's go to you on WMAL. Pete Mundo in for Vince Coglianese. Let's fit Larry in Potomac. He's on line one. Hey, Larry, good afternoon.
Hey, how are you today?
I'm well, Larry. What's happening?
Well, listen, I heard you say, and I hadn't heard, that Chris Christie went over to Ukraine to see Zelensky. Well, I'm pretty sure he went over there because he's going to try and figure out how to get in touch with those Burisma guys and some of those oligarchs and get them some money like his buddy Joe Biden.
That's well done, Larry. That's well done. And, maybe you and I can get a first-class ticket over there sometimes, I could use a side gig.
It's not a bad idea. Have a good one. Enjoying the show.
Thanks, Larry. Have a great day. Appreciate it. Oh, goodness gracious. It's 888-630-WMAL. That's 888-630-9625. Pete Mundo in for Vince Coglianese. 426. It is good to be here. Pete Mundo out of Kansas City in for Vince Coglianese on a Friday afternoon. Hope the start of the weekend is going well for you. Now, I'm excited I think that this DeSantis Newsom thing, unless Newsom backs out, is a win. Because, by the way, I think DeSantis will clean his clock. How could you possibly make the case if you're Gavin Newsom that you're in a better place than the state of Florida is right now? Let's go to line 3, Phil in Fredericksburg. Hey, Phil, good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon. Look, I got to tell you, if this happens, DeSantis just has to keep hammering. He has to be saying, look, everybody's moving out of California. You've destroyed it. People are moving to my state, Florida, because I take care of the people that I serve. What have you done, Gavin Newsom? What have you done? You just been rich? You've destroyed your state. What about the homelessness, the lawlessness? People are running out of California like crazy. People are coming to Florida. America does not want California cancer running across our country. We want to have American exceptionalism, and you are not it, Gavin Newsom.
Phil, I hope that DeSantis, when he gets on that stage, brings your level of enthusiasm, my man. That's what he needs. He needs a little bit of your juice, Phil. Would you give it up to DeSantis? He needs that.
He needs to fire it up, and he needs to start flame-throwing these liberals and telling them exactly what to do, and where they can go and where they can stay.
Yep. Attaboy there, Phil. Have a great day. I mean that, by the way. DeSantis needs a little bit of the Phil in Fredericksburg pizzazz is what he needs, because it has been, put me to sleep. And by the way, Phil's right. Florida's seen the greatest inflow of people in this country the last 3 years, and California's seen the greatest outflow. It's not close. People are voting with their feet. That's what they're doing. Now, I'm here in Kansas City, and we're starting to see a smattering of California plates because they're running out of places to go, right? They're going to Texas, they're going to Nevada, they're going to Arizona. And now they're like, well, what's next? Well, the Chiefs are good. Let's go to Kansas City. It's like, no, please. Or if you come here, just don't screw up our states like you screwed up your own state. That's all I ask. I can't wait. I think it's going to be great. This jobs report that came out today, what do we make of it? And I'll actually ask our next guest, Steve Moore, former Donald Trump economic advisor, is going to be here. We'll talk about that with him and what's to come over the next few months on the economic front. Steve Moore is right around the corner. Pete Mundo in for Vince Coglianese. It's great to be here on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. We're making sense of the news. Happy Friday afternoon. I'm Pete Mundo out of Kansas City in for Vince Coglianese on WMAL. It is great to be here with you as we get it rolling and welcome on our friend Steve Moore, former Donald Trump economic advisor. Always great to have him on the show, whether I have him on in Kansas City or if I'm in his backyard here in Washington, D.C. Steve, good afternoon. How are you?
Hey, Pete. Good to be with you. Welcome to Washington.
It's good to be here. It's good to be here, my friend. So this jobs report today, markets didn't love it. What is Steve Moore's reaction as he sees the numbers come in slightly under expectations?
Well, it was a slightly disappointing jobs report, although we have a very healthy jobs market right now. There's no question about it. We have 9 million job openings in this country. So the problem with the economy right now is not a lack of jobs. In fact, if anything, we're not seeing much growth in employment in manufacturing and construction, wholesale, transportation. So a lot of the jobs that are kind of the tough blue collar, hard hat jobs, people aren't filling those jobs. And it's hard to explain why that's, you go to any factory or you go to any construction site and they're looking for workers. So we do have a healthy jobs market. The real problem with the economy, and this is reflected in today's report again, is that we're starting to see, continuing to see workers lagging behind the inflation rate in terms of their wages. So since Trump came into office, and Pete, you and I have talked about this month after month, the average family has lost somewhere around $5,000 in purchasing power. And so that's why when Joe Biden runs around the country saying, oh, my gosh, Bidenomics has been this incredible success. Isn't it wonderful? Like, what country is he talking about? Because people are really suffering. Remember, just one other quick thing. Prices today are roughly 16% higher than they were when Biden came into office. And so that inflation hasn't gone away. So when Biden said the other day, "Oh, prices are starting to fall," no, they're not. They're still rising. They're just rising at a slower pace, Pete.
Well, Steve, that brings up, you brought up a lot of great points. But one, I saw the headline from the Babylon Bee earlier. White House says Bidenomics so successful, the average American has twice as many jobs as they had 2 years ago. I mean, Steve, people are trying to fill the gap, right? That's what's happening right now.
That's right. And one of the ways they're filling the gap, which is kind of scary to me, is just like the federal government loading up on debt. We're at, $33 trillion on our national debt, thanks to Biden adding $6 trillion in 2 years. There's never been a more financially reckless president in history than Joe Biden. But also, families. So I was mentioning that families have lost about $5,000 of purchasing power. So what are they doing to make up the difference? How are they maintaining their normal standard of living and buying the things that they normally buy? Well, they're just loading up their credit card debt. And, those bills have to be paid at some point.
Steve Moore is joining us here, FreedomWorks economist, former Donald Trump economic advisor. Steve, when I look at also the labor participation rate, it hasn't gotten enough attention, but it's not inching up. So when we see these low unemployment numbers and you're seeing the administration brag about 3.5% unemployment, the labor participation matters here. If people aren't looking for jobs, the unemployment's going to be artificially low. How should we factor that into studying and looking at the health of this economy right now?
Well, Pete, it's a great point. And so we probably have 2 or 3 million more people working today if we just had a normal labor force participation. But a lot of people of work, we're talking about people of working age that could be and should be working that aren't. And a lot of economists have been kind of scratching their heads saying, what's going on here? I don't think it's too mystifying what's going on here. It's that Biden has basically given so much free money to people in terms of welfare benefits and other payments that people don't have to work. Now, to be fair, they have cut back. Remember in the budget deal that we did, the debt deal earlier, they're requiring work for more of these programs. But you can, our study at the Committee to Unleash Prosperity found if you have 2 parents that aren't working, collecting this whole panoply of programs that are available, you could make $100,000 and not work a single hour. So,
wow.
Now that's in certain states with high benefits. Probably in most states, it's probably closer to 60 or 70. But if the choice is going, to a construction site and working 8-9 hours, hard work every day, or sitting on the sofa and watching Netflix, I have a feeling a lot of people are choosing the latter.
Yeah. Steve, when you look at the wages, this is something that we've touched on here, but the wages and how much leverage workers have, it seems like there was a point over the last 3 years or so when workers held basically all the chips. They had a lot of leverage. Is that now going down? And if so, are we seeing that leverage balance out between the employer and the employee? And what does that mean going forward?
Well, that's a very good question because right now, because there's a shortage of workers, the workers are starting to bid up wages. And look, I'm in favor of higher wages for workers. I want American workers to be the best paid workers in the world. But when wages go up faster than productivity, in other words, the amount that workers are producing, that by definition creates what we call a wage push inflation. And I got to say this, Pete, when I do shows like yours and I say, the inflation rate is 3 or 4%, which is the, official rate, people get so angry at me.
Yeah.
Because, and I now realize what they're talking about because I went with my wife I don't normally do the grocery store shopping, but I went with her a couple of days ago, go get some milk, go get some eggs, go get some, hamburger meat. I couldn't believe how much, these things are like 40, 50% more expensive than they were, a few years ago when Trump was president. And I want to remind people, do you know what the inflation rate was the month that Trump left office, Pete?
Was it 1.2 or something like that?
Yeah, you're pretty close. 1.5, somewhere around that. But, you're pretty close. So essentially that's pretty close to almost no inflation, right? When you have an inflation rate between 1 and 1.5%. And then it shot, just to give you and your listeners a sense of how incompetent Biden is, he took the inflation rate in 18 months from 1.5% to 9.2%. And then he said, remember they said it was transitory, it's going to go away. And now, look, I don't want to depress people on a Friday afternoon because it's the start of a nice weekend. But I got to tell you, the fact is we are starting to see inflation climb again. Now, I don't know what you're paying in Kansas City, but in Washington, we're now paying in many stations over $4 a gallon gasoline. In California, it's over $5 a gallon again. And of course, that's not just because of the natural forces of just generally higher prices, but then we have this lunatic energy policy of Biden, which basically says we're not going to produce our oil and gas here, which somebody's got to explain the logic of that to me, because it means we're producing 2 million fewer barrels a day as a country. The price of oil right now is about it's a little under $85 a barrel, but let's say it's $85. So do the math. That means, are you ready for this, Pete? We're losing $170 million a day.
My goodness.
Because of this crazy policy that we're, and by the way, it's not like this is solving the global warming problem. We're still consuming a lot of oil and gas. It's just we're having to get more of it from OPEC and from Russia and these countries that hate us. So it's a national security crisis. It's an economic crisis. Think of the jobs we're giving up. Think of what this does to our trade deficit. All of these things, we're playing right into the hands of our enemy. I mean, I showed these statistics, by the way. You mentioned Trump. I actually had the privilege of flying with him to Iowa this past weekend for that big Iowa convention they had, the Republican convention. And I was showing him these statistics, and he couldn't believe. I mean, he knew it was bad, but not this bad.
That's amazing. And next time you're in Iowa, Steve, you got to give a shout down to us in KC. That's great. You were right in the backyard there. Well, so let me ask you,
how far is Des Moines from Kansas City?
3 hours shot right down 35. That's all. It's easy peasy. You can't mess it up.
Okay.
Steve Moore is joining us. I'm Pete Mundo in for Vince Coglianese out of Kansas City, as you just heard. Transitory inflation. I want to go back to that, Steve. Mr. Transitory himself, Jerome Powell, Fed chair.
Yeah.
What does today's job report mean for him on rate hikes going forward, if anything?
Hell if I know. Who knows what this guy's going to do next? I mean, we had 11 rate increases, right? And so, just over a year ago, they've raised interest rates by 5.5 percentage points. Yeah, I mean, so in other words, now you've got 5.5% rates. And as an example, how does that matter? Well, when Trump, again, going back to when Trump left office, the mortgage rates were, believe it or not, like you could get a 30-year mortgage at a 3% rate. Now the mortgage rates are 7%, and in many markets over that. Well, that hurts the housing market, right? Both the buyer and seller are hurt by, these higher rates. And who is the biggest debtor in the whole world?
You there, Steve? Did I lose you?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Who is the biggest debtor in the whole world?
China?
No, the United States, right? With our $33 trillion of debt. And they've got our debt. Yeah. So in other words, when those interest rates go up, the biggest loser is the United States taxpayers, right? Because we have to pay these higher interest rates. Well, guess what? I mean, again, I'm not trying to ruin people's weekend, but the interest rates on the debt and the interest payments that we have to make month after month after month, those are going to soon be the single biggest item in our entire budget, Pete. Just
it's
interest
crazy.
On the debt.
It's
crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts. Steve, what about, we saw the headlines this week about Fitch lowering the credit rating for the U.S. from AAA to AA+. What is that, like, in Main Street terms? What does that mean anything today that we need to be thinking about going forward?
Well, I have kind of a little bit of an unorthodox view on this. First of all, I think it's preposterous that the Fitch is saying that we're not AAA on our government bonds. I mean, if U.S. Treasury bills aren't AAA, then what in the world is? So if you have a Treasury bond, folks, you don't have to worry about the government defaulting on it. That will not happen. The full faith and credit of the United States government stands behind our bonds. And so shame on Fitch for basically saying, we think there's a chance of default. No, the chance of that is about as close. Let me put it like this. It's more likely that Joe Biden would win the Boston Marathon than that we would default on our debt. It's not.
Does he get to ride his bike, or are you saying he's got to run it?
Anyway, he can do it. No, but my point is, yes, is the debt a crisis? It absolutely is. It's like the analogy that I like to use Pete, is it's like if you've got termites in your basement,
Mm-hmm.
you better do something about that, right? Or the whole house is going to collapse. We have termites in our basement, and those termites are the national debt, which gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So my point is, the problem isn't that it's going to be that we're going to default on the debt. It means that we're going to just our kids are going to spend half their lives just paying off this debt, which is bigger and bigger. And you mentioned China. You're right, too, because a lot of that debt is owned by the Chinese. So that means our children are going to be paying money to the Chinese kids because of our incredibly reckless fiscal policy today. We have got to take a chainsaw to this federal budget. We have to cut. And Biden came into office, it's only grown a little over 1%.
Mm-hmm.
We got to get back to, Reagan and Trump style. Remember how well the economy was performing before COVID? Remember
Yeah.
that?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was like a gang, but let's get back to that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people forget if it hadn't been for COVID, Trump would have won the biggest, re-election in the history of. He would have probably gotten. I mean, I think Reagan got 49 states when he ran for re-election. I bet Trump would have probably come close to that if it had not been for COVID. And so, it's a shame that the American people made a big mistake in the 2020 election.
Well, I'll just add this, Steve Moore, FreedomWorks economist, former Trump economic advisor. You were with him in Iowa last week, and I would say this: if you can politely nudge him, if he gets back in the big chair, he can't spend like he did. That's the only criticism I've got on the economic policy. He spent too much, Steve.
I know. I'm with you on that one. I tell him that all the time, Mr. President. We got to get spending under control. I mean, we did the tax cuts. We did the deregulation. We controlled the border. We did the pro-America energy. We did a lot of great stuff. I can't give him a high grade on cutting government spending because you know what? I got to slip you a little secret, Pete. Politicians love to spend money.
That's why they need guys like Steve Moore to keep them in line in the White House. That's what they need more of.
I did what I could. But, look, I have great admiration for what Trump did for the economy. I think he could turn things around. I give that guy 9 months. In 9 months back in the Oval Office, we'll get this economy booming again.
Last thing, Steve. We were just talking about this DeSantis versus Gavin Newsom
I love
potential
it.
debate. I love it, too. I love it. I think DeSantis will clean the floor with them, wipe the floor with them.
Oh, my God,
What do you think about it?
I'm with you totally. I mean, I'm going to get my popcorn and my, my beer. I'm going to watch that thing because look, there's two models of America today. America is two countries today. We're not one unified country. We are blue state America and red state America. And red states like Florida and Texas and Tennessee and Utah are absolutely booming. And California is a wreck. My home state of Illinois is a wreck. New York is a mess. New Jersey is a mess. So, let's put those two models aside. And America, you decide. Do you want America to look like the craziness of California? Anybody who's been to San Francisco or L.A., Oakland, or any of those cities lately, can you imagine if we did that to the whole country? And then you go to Florida, and it's booming. You've got incredible enterprise. People are moving from all over the country and the world to Florida, and Miami has become the new financial center of the world practically. So let's put those two states side by side and let the American people say, do we want America to look more like California or do we want it to look more like Florida? I think it's a simple answer. And I know Ron DeSantis, if it can't be Donald Trump, I'd love to see Ron DeSantis in the White House because he's done an amazing job in Florida. And they've had a string of great, governors. They had, Jeb Bush and Rick Scott and now DeSantis. And it's amazing. And you can't buy a house in Florida right now. Forget it.
No, forget
Everybody's moving.
Absolutely right. Steve Moore, FreedomWorks, senior economic contributor, of course, former Donald Trump economic advisor. Steve, it's always great to have you on. It's good to be with you in your backyard here on WMAL. Thanks so much for being here.
Okay, have a great weekend. Take care.
You as well. Steve Moore, great to have him on. I'm Pete Mundo out of Kansas City in for Vince Coglianese on WMAL. Approaching the top of the hour, Pete Mundo out of Kansas City in for Vince Coglianese on WMAL. Let's go to you on a Friday afternoon. Join us at 888-630-WMAL, 888-630-9625. Great conversation with Steve Moore. Mike the Lib is in Gainesville. I love that name. What's up, Mike? Good afternoon.
Yes. The last time we had a chance to pay off the national debt was the Bush-Gore presidential race. And the American people voted barely for tax cuts versus paying off the national debt. So it was the Republican Party that decided not to pay off the national debt and instead do tax cuts.
Let's say that would have happened in your utopian world, Mike. Let me ask you quick. Do you think that Obama, who added about $9 trillion to the debt, magically would have kept the surplus going or no?
Well, Gore would have definitely kept the surplus going. And then because basically the Democrats raised taxes and the Republicans constrained spending at the time. So, the war on terrorism is basically what got everybody off track, and that's because Bush was elected.
What's got us off track, Mike? Appreciate the call. What's gotten us off track is everything, by the way. And when you factor in things like Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, it's all out of control. And everyone's in a bad job. Republicans and Democrats. But, we know who likes to spend more. We know how that goes. Bill Jacobson, legal insurrection on the latest on the Trump indictment next.